Recording in progress.
Hey, how's everybody doing? It's a long Monday with this workout. But thank you for coming. So I've got a little booklet for you again this time, but if you open it, it is mostly empty inside. So you will be drawing your own diagram to help you remember what we're learning today. So our focus today is on book hinges. So that is this part of the book. It's like if the cover was a door, the part that helps it open. So there's hinges in the front and the back of your books. And the first thing we're going to do is we are going to repair loose hinges. So loose hinges are when the end papers have separated from the covers, but haven't pulled away completely, where then it's like a separate piece. So everything is still connected, it's just loose. And to deal with that, we are gonna make this very fancy tool with a bottle of Elmer's glue and a knitting needle and some scissors to cut off the top of your glue bottle. So we use this tool when I work for the University of Iowa book repair. And instead of an Elmer's glue bottle, we used like a liquid dish soap bottle, but the principle is the same. So I think Alexis is going to get some more scissors, and you're going to want to watch your fingers on this, but with your glue bottle that you brought today or that Alexis is giving to you, you are just going to very carefully, so you don't get your fingers, but you're just going to cut off the orange piece. You can even, I'm not going to pop mine off because we're going to use this later, but you can even pop off the orange piece and then cut it. And you want it to kind of have like a little bit of a neck there. I'll walk around so that you can see what it looks like. Oh shoot, paper towel. So this is what it looks like, and then our knitting needle is going to slide inside.
Okay.
Sometimes. If you can't get the orange part off, that's fine too. You can just do it right underneath it.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going for it. And like I said, you can make the same tool with a liquid dish soap dispenser as well. It just depends on. I promise it's possible.
Here it goes.
Yep, and even if you lost a little bit of the neck there, that's okay too. The most important thing is just that now you have a hole that is wide enough to put your knitting needle.
Thank you. You're welcome. And then the knitting needle goes down.
Yep, and you'll just kind of like swivel it around in there and get it all gluey. And then when you pull it out, you can see it's got glue on it. Oh, and you will get a little messy today.
Thank you.
All right, you got yours. Excellent. Laura.
I thought I could pop it off.
You may need to abandon all hope of that.
So, because you're cutting through the white underneath.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yep. I feel like the orange pieces. I feel like the orange pieces only come off when you don't want them to come off, but not when you do.
I know we've got a lot to like clean it out. Yes, but
Yeah. But these are all brand new glue bottles, so of course they're on there tight.
It's a little yucky. Is it gonna dry out?
Nope, so that'll be okay. What's gonna happen is as you pull your knitting needle out and you push it back in, you can see like some glue. Yes, exactly. And I actually just recently cleaned off the top of my knitting needle because it had gotten like really goofy. Yeah. All right. Okay. So on your workbenches, the thinner books are going to be the ones that we will practice hinge tightening on. All of the books at your workstations were donated to the library, which means you can take them with you so that you can check on your men the next day, which we weren't able to do last time. And then once your books are all mended, you can do whatever you would like.
You know, Cassie, this is just a way to clean up the donation.
Oh, trust me, we have lots of donations. All right, so I'm going to show you how to use this tool. We'll see if we can get it on the camera without poking the camera. So you are going to kind of separate your cover your end papers from the cover, kind of as much as you can, because you really want to get in there with the glue to get a good seal. And then you're gonna swish around your very fancy knitting needle. Make sure it's all nice and covered with glue. And just stick it down in. Hang on, I gotta get my angles right. So then you will stick it down into that open space and you're gonna kind of rub the needle on the end papers, rub it a little bit on the cover. We'll do it on both sides. You will not put glue on the spine to connect the text block to the cover because we want there to be a gap there. It's called an open spine and it makes it so that the book doesn't tear itself apart when you're opening and closing. So we want that space there, but we don't want the space in between the end papers and the cover. Now, if your book is taller than your knitting needle, which it probably is, all you'll do after you do both sides is you'll flip it over and then do the same thing on the bottom at the tail of the text block. Now, I don't worry too much about putting too much glue. That's the nice thing about the knitting needle tool is it only holds kind of a surface level of glue, unlike a brush where you really can get too much in there. And once you've got it all glued up, you'll kind of realign your book. So you'll push the text block back. I'm using my thumbs here to push the text block back into place. I'm closing the book. If you have a bone folder, you can use that to press into the shoulder to kind of make sure that it glues in place where you want it to. And you can also check the head and the tail of your book to make sure no glue has kind of squeezed out. Mine looks great. If there is a little bit, you can just use your finger or a paper towel to just kind of wipe it because you don't want to glue the tops of your pages together where they need to open.
I maybe missed it while I was downstairs. but
Sure.
Did you talk about when this is a needed repair versus a hinge replacement?
Yes. So,
Okay.
yep, we talked about how.
That's my biggest thing. Like, I don't know when to do which repair.
Yes. Yeah. So this is the repair that you do when there's space, but everything else is still connected.
There's space on this, but it's, I mean, I don't think I have a book that does that. Yeah, so I just want to make sure that I'm not crazy. I think I pulled this. Okay. That's like.
So-
To get. Okay.
Yeah, and so one good way, so this is what I did when I was downstairs looking through the donations, is I literally just picked up the books and held them by the covers like this to see if there was space. And so that's all you'll do. If you could just let gravity do it for you, just open it flat. I don't know how this is gonna look in the video, but open it flat and hang it down. And if there's too much space, that's how you know that it needs it. And then also you can see it's all still intact. All of the end papers are still intact. There's no gapping here. It's only along with the cover on the inside. So you should each have 2 books at least at your table that fit this description. And I pulled the small ones specifically for this. Some of the bigger ones could also probably use just a hinge tightening, but we are going to do a hinge replacement on those because we're learning today.
Look, this one, knitting needle. It's too big. It's too big. Can I use this?
Oh,
Oh.
pull it apart.
Okay.
Yeah.
On that side, okay. As in say, could I use
Yeah, you absolutely could. So you can
that? These are my
definitely.
repair kit.
Good, yeah, you can definitely use different tools. Other than the knitting needle, Laura just pulled out like a wooden skewer that's a little bit narrower. So that definitely works. I like the metal knitting needle because the glue doesn't soak into it, and you can reuse it numerous times. But yeah, the wooden skewer definitely works too. I've also seen techniques without sticking the knitting needle in the glue, where you use a brush and you brush the glue on and then do it. I feel like this works better in terms of the amount of glue, and also then you don't have to wash a glue brush also when you're done. If you're doing a lot of these, which in the library, I feel like most of our repairs tend to be hinge tightening, it just makes sense to have a go-to tool to do that. And sometimes you won't need to do hinge tightening on both of the hinges. Sometimes it might just be the front or it might just be the back. But this type of repair is really good to do as soon as you notice it, because then it is less likely to turn into a larger repair, like a hinge replacement, which we're going to do next. And then to dry them, we'll do the same things we did last time, where you'll just kind of make a pile. I don't really have a good spot to make a pile. Here we go. You'll just make a pile of all of your repairs, let them sit overnight, and then check them the next day. These ones are usually pretty good at holding. Occasionally, you might not have gotten enough glue in there, but you probably won't know until it comes back for another hinge tightening. But it's a pretty simple fix. If when you're keeping track of the mending you're doing, if you want to take notes on what kinds of repairs you've done, sometimes that can be helpful. We have a book here that I have now repaired 3 times, but I didn't write down what repairs I did, so I don't know. I don't think it's the same repair every time. I think just different parts of the book are breaking. It's one of those really thick, like sci-fi fantasy books, and the text blocks are just too heavy for the way that they bind them. So, but I wish I had taken notes on what I'd done so that I could know for sure that it was different things and not just the same thing over and over again. All right, how are you feeling about hinge tightening? Pretty good? Okay, great, because I have a cart full of books that need hinge tightening that I saved for this workshop. So you're gonna get more practice. So I'm gonna hand these ones out to you. Let's see. Maybe 2 each to start. And these ones you don't get to stay home. These have to stay here. And sometimes they might need an additional mend. So let me know if you think it needs more than just. Yeah.
Kitty, for one thing. And it's already got a little hinge.
Yes, it does.
So where am I trying to glue?
See on the right?
It's on the right hand
Mhm.
side. Just trying to get that.
Yeah.
shape.
Yeah, so you can see on the left-hand side, it's still pretty well attached. Probably from all of this work that's already been done.
Okay, so just on that side.
Yeah, and you can even kind of pull it open a little bit more to really get in there.
Okay.
Yeah, and you'll definitely need to pull from both sides. Yeah, those looking signs just get hammered, but they're all like limited edition. Like, you can never replace them. So we mend them until you really can't anymore. Yeah, absolutely. And then on this one, you just want to make sure you don't get the spine. You know, just get sometimes, if you can see on this, it's got a paper backing on the spine. If this has come off, you actually need to do inside here. Because we want this brown paper to be attached to the spine that helps keep it strong, but we still want to make sure that there's a hollow back so that when it opens, the outside spine doesn't come. Actually, can I show that on the camera a little bit for everybody? Tell me your name. Lauren. Lauren. Right. Okay, so Lauren has a great book here. So it needs the hinge tightening. We can see that there are loose hinges, but also the spine lining has come off. So you can see there's this part that's the hollow spine, and then there's the end band and the paper lining, and then the spine of the text block. So we don't want to attach the text block to the spine, but we do want the spine lining to be reattached to the text block. So Lauren's going to do the same thing that she did with the hinges, where she's just going to use her gluey knitting needle and stick it down in and rub it all around. And then when she closes the book, everything will go where it's supposed to, hopefully, and that will help strengthen that binding even more.
I think okay.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
The hardest part is the acrobat.
Yeah.
Hook into place.
Yes. That's another reason why I like the knitting needle tool, is because it's a one-handed thing. You don't have to hold it in one hand and then paint it up with the glue brush and set the glue brush down. Take it. Oh.
So I guess
So I would do the hinge tightening. Yeah, so in this case,
like it's a little thread.
yeah. So I would do the hinge tightening first, because if we do the tie back first, you can see the attach up here and then we do the
Okay,
the
so like, I guess. Would you do that sort of in one motion? Like, should I do the glue and then would you set, or would you do the glue with this? Like, all
yeah,
at
so
once?
I would do the glue first and then let it sit.
Okay.
With this one, because there's the hole there, I'll give you some wax paper. And we'll stick that in between because we don't want it to,
See now.
yeah, exactly.
I think I have some actually.
Do you? Okay. You keep yours, I'll give
Yeah,
you.
I was gonna say, maybe.
Yeah, I've got a bunch up here. Let me show this on camera. Okay, so Andrew has this book that has loose hinges. You can see the gapping, but it also has kind of damaged hinges. And so for this book, we're going to tighten the hinges first with our knitting needle tool. We're gonna let it, we're gonna put wax paper in between so that the glue doesn't glue the pages to the cover that we don't want glued to the cover. And then we'll do some hinge reinforcement. I usually like to use Tyvek tape that Demco sells. It's nice and flexible. It doesn't tear, and it isn't as finicky as book tape is. So it's a really good option. So that's what you would do with something like this, where it's still, you can see it is still mostly attached. And because this is a skinny book, a hinge replacement is a little more complicated. So we'll go first with just the hinge tightening and the hinge reinforcement. Then if it comes back, we may look at doing a hinge replacement or just a oftentimes picture books like that are at that stage, the reason we're repairing them is because we can't replace them. So.
Yeah, well, it is, I mean, I assume that's supposed to be attached, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so the only book structure where the cover spine should be attached to the text block is a paperback book. So every hardcover book should have a hollow spine. So it should have that space because that makes it so that the book can open and it doesn't damage the spine. If they're attached, the stiffness of the hardcover spine will fight against being open with the text block and it'll cause damage to the book every time it's open.
Catcher, this one, is this one hinge? Or is this just like the last time I was? This is trouble.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't use the. I would probably do it down and do it. So I'll put it up on here. So here, I'll show you what we were looking at. So this one is a hinge that has totally detached. And so we talked about, or I guess I shouldn't say totally detached, the end papers, the fly paper has totally detached from the text block. And so we did this kind of repair last time where we put our wax paper shield and we glued it up and we reattached it. This one's a little trickier because you can see it's also ripped here. And so what I would do is I would do our normal glue mend and just keep an eye on, lining it up as best I can. I would stick wax paper in between here so any glue that comes out of the rip doesn't spill out. And then afterwards, I would do a Tyvek tape reinforcement on this. So, yeah, but then you can see it also is a little bit of a loose hinge. It's got a lot going on. But that's where I would start, would be reattaching here with glue, Tyvek reinforcement, and then maybe a hinge tightening if it still is looking loose. Oftentimes with books like that have so many steps to mend them, it might make more sense to just see if you can replace it. Especially a more popular book, you may have received some as donations that you could just replace it with for free. But it's also a good opportunity to practice different problem solving. And also it's low stakes because if you try something and it doesn't work, then you still know that you can get a replacement for it after all. All right. We ready to move on to replacing a hinge? Or do we need a break? We're good? Okay. So replacing broken hinges. So let me show you. This is one that I have done. This is what your book will look like afterwards. So this text block was totally detached from the cover. And it's an older Pokemon book. I could not find a replacement for it, but it was still really popular, so I wanted to keep it in circulation. And so, and you can't really see, whoops, you can't really see it in the video, but there's also book tape or maybe even packing tape that had already been used to try to reinforce this hinge, and it was not enough. And same thing on the back. And so I used this, I'm trying to think of what it's called. I wrote it in the binder tape. So this is something I discovered in a box of random book mending tools that we had here at the library that nobody knew how to use. And so I unpacked it the other day and I discovered this binder's tape, and it's actually kind of magical. So I'm going to show you how to use it. This is what we have that was in the book mending kit. And it is actually double stitched binder's tape. And so it is designed to be used on a book that has a spine that is 1 inch wide. And you glue it all up and you stick your text block on this side and you fold these flaps up. And then you glue up the other side and you stick it on the cover and you close it all up. And then it still gives you that hollow spine space that you need, but it reattaches. So it's really cool, except that this only works for books that have a 1 inch spine, which when you're working in a public library, specifically, you have a wide range of sizes. I mean, a lot of the books that we've done here today are those picture books that have really tiny spines. We also have a lot of larger like fantasy novels that are much thicker than 1 inch. So what I did is I just cut it in half. So each of you at your workstations has 2 strips. And so it used to be 1 strip with 1 inch in between the sewing. And now we have 2 strips. And so I'm going to show you how to use these for a hinge replacement. Now, the thicker books that I pulled out for you to practice. I was going to fully detach all of them before you got here, but I didn't. So you get to do that piece. Normally, of course, we wouldn't necessarily do that. They would arrive to us detached and then we would repair them. But we're practicing today. So, and I've got a box cutter too, if anyone wants to cut through. You might have some netting, fine netting that needs to be separated. I can also come around and just cut them for you if you'd like. Raise your hand if you want me to come around.
Yeah.
So prep it for you. Okay.
Yeah. Well made. I should say, this book looks really good.
Remember, we are practicing so that you can save many more books in the future. And so often I found that when books need a hinge replacement, they need it on both sides. But we're just going to practice on one side today. Maybe it was Let me see your other book. Alexis, do you have a box cutter back there too? Yes.
You just want me to tell how much the phone was?
Yeah. So is this detached enough or not?
That's what I'm. Yes, you can see this one doesn't have a hollow back. And so that's why it worked off. Yeah.
So because
There we go. That's what we're going for.
Yeah.
Do you not get books for
Oh, no.
Just like, okay.
Yeah.
Or you have a- That's right.
This is my mistake. And probably, I think I'll hold down because I know, we're just gonna hold on to it and I'm gonna go with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Sarah, did you get yours?
Yeah. Perfect. Got it. Yeah, my phone is-
And I don't have any to show you on. Shoot, I'm gonna grab this one. Wonky. So I was telling Warren, so as we tried to pull this one apart, it ripped, and it's because the outside spine was glued straight onto the textbook. And so it didn't have space to separate because it was glued on like this, which is not how it's supposed to be. So. All right,
Was
so.
there a repair that someone else had done, or
Right,
was
yeah.
that a publisher?
No, it was definitely publisher glue. You can see,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
I actually seems like it was glued in there too.
Yeah, so are you able to pull it apart a little bit, or do you think it's gonna? Yeah. Mhm. Yes.
You're right, it didn't have to be.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. So first thing you're gonna do, scissors. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm not prepared today. I wanted to be. So you've got your book that needs to be mended, and the text block is totally detached from the spine. It's a bigger book, so you don't want to just glue it up. You really want it to be strong on that spine, especially books that have this netting support. Just doing the edge, the tip-on gluing technique that we learned last time will not be strong enough to keep it together. It will definitely come back to you. So this is when we would do a hinge replacement. So you got your hinge tape, and you are going to cut it to the height of the text block. It's okay if you cut it a little bit shorter than the text block. You want to do your best to have it be the same size as the text block. You don't want it to be any bigger. So you can, if you got a pencil, you can make a little mark where you can eyeball it. Alexis, would you mind going to grab scissors for everybody? Thank you.
You said it's okay if it's a little shorter.
Yep, it's okay if it's a little short. You don't want it longer,
Sure.
because then the glue gets all over.
Okay.
They're ergonomic scissors. Yeah, so has anyone seen this binder's tape before, like in a book mending tool box somewhere and gone, I don't know what this is? Yes, mine also sat in the box for 5 years before I revisited it and tried to figure it out. So, all right, so once you've got your your binder's tape cut to the size that you need, you are going to attach it to your text block. So I've got glue here. And we'll just watch for this part, and then I'll go around and give you each glue to work on yours. So the goal here is that we want the stitching on your binder's tape to be right on the corner of your text. So this is where we're going to place it. And we're going to start by gluing up the back, because we're going to attach to the text block first. So both sides are really identical. So it doesn't, I said the back, it's just the side that you are going to put on the text block. But your tape at this point is still flat.
Okay.
We haven't butterflied it open yet. So this tape also has some kind of adhesive on it. I'm assuming that you could activate it with water. I don't know, it's very old. So I've just been using our white spool glue in addition to whatever's on there, and then that seems to work just fine. So I'm going to use my little wax paper guard here because I don't want to get glue on my work surface, but I do want to glue out every part of the binder's tape. So I'm charging up my glue brush with a bunch of glue. And this time we don't need to worry so much about having too much glue because we can just brush it off. Unlike when we were gluing directly onto the book, and then it gets really messy. We're also gluing a larger surface than we normally do for a direct book repair. So you need more glue. This is the kind of repair that it's nice to have maybe a larger glue brush, so you don't need to go back to the glue as often, but one this size works fine too. Okay, so you can see I've got glue in all the corners, all the way through. The whole thing is glued up. I'm just using my fingertips here to hold it in place as I glue down further. So they left a little mark and I've got a little glue on my fingers, but I'm just gonna rub it off. And so now we take the glue side down and we fold it onto our book. This is a good time to adjust it slightly. Mine was a little too high up, and so I just kind of gently moved it down. And once you've got it where you want it on the book, this is normally where we would stop and let it sit overnight to really adhere. But since we are practicing today, I'm going to show you the next step right now. So you can see we've got the hinge tape attached on the text block here and on the spine here. So the next step is to glue up the other side so that we can attach the cover back to the book. So this part is a little trickier because your binder's tape is already attached to your text block, but all you need is your trusty wax paper. You just slide it underneath, and then I usually just hold the other side up with my hand, and that tends to work pretty well. You could also find a book of about the same thickness to put underneath with wax paper in between, of course, if you want a flatter surface. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to glue up the whole strip of tape. And I'm making sure that the glue on my hands, I'm not using those fingers to hold it up because I don't want glue to get on the back side. Glue it all up. Making sure to get to all the edges, especially the corners. So once I've got it all glued up, I'm pulling my wax paper out because now it has glue on it. And so I don't want to get that glued to my book. And so this flap right here It's going to attach to the spine, which is okay because it's not also glued flat onto the text box. So it's going to allow for that hollow back that we've been talking about. So we're just going to fold it down, and then this part is going to attach directly to the front. So you'll line it up as best you can. This one's a little wonky since I ripped it off on the other side. But so you line it up the best you can, you smooth it down. And again, this is normally where you would leave it overnight to let it really adhere. But I'm going to open it up so that you can see what it looks like. If you can, it's all very white. So you can see, so now we've basically reverse engineered a library binding. So we've got the book tape is adhered on the front cover and on the text block. And then, actually this works great that the spine is broken. And then you can see it's adhered on the spine and the text block. So if it was attached, you would be able to see that it is, oh, the glue's coming off a little bit, but it's preserving that hollow back that this book actually didn't have to begin with, but that we want the book to have. And then if you needed to do it on the other side, you would just do the exact same thing. Again, waiting a day in between each of these steps to allow the glue to really adhere to your book. All right, you ready to try it?
Yeah.
That
Okay.
was really cool.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
got questions right away.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when we cut this, there are all these papers, you clean those out? Or
Yeah.
leave them in? Okay.
Especially because there's like some kind of stiff glue going on
Yeah.
here,
So like,
and it's just gonna interfere.
pair of scissors or that, and we can clean it up.
All right, and I've got glue. When you're ready, I will come and put it in your little glue. Oh, thank you. Making sure you got everything. Ready for this? Ready to do it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sarah, you ready? I'm ready. Okay. Yeah, this is one of my very favorite mends to do because it's new to me still. But I just think it is so handy and it really holds up so well on library books.
If you were gonna do it on a thin, like a picture book.
Yes.
Do you have to cut the tape down?
Yes, that's a great question, Alexis. So you can see on this Pokemon book that this spine is much thinner than our tape. And so, so I did exactly that, where I, while it was detached, I put the text block, the spine along the tape, and I just marked it with a pencil, and I cut it. So this was, the spine tape was very thin. And then, but then I left the flap for the cover the full size, because you do want like as much of a flap as you can get, but you can't have the spine side be too big, because then it doesn't fit.
When you did it on both the front and the back, did you then have that binding tape on top of each other?
Yep. And that's okay, because again, it's preserving that hollow back. And so it's just like adding an extra spine lining, which especially when a book has come apart, it's definitely not going to hurt it. It probably didn't have a spine lining to begin with, which I think this one didn't. So, yeah, good questions. you can use your bone folder too, if you wanna make sure it's really nice and flat. I do a lot of repairs just smoothing my hands on things. The bone folders are definitely useful tools for getting in the little holes.
Well, the secret is you have to do it from the inside piece, not the butter, you have to take butterfly out.
And this one, I would add some spine lining, because otherwise this is attached to this piece that's already attached. Oh, absolutely. Great example, you're getting home. Okay, so Lauren's got another great one. That's a little funky. So you can see, so this book did have a spine lining, but it is coming off. You can see that. And so she's got the binder's tape attached on the spine, but it's on this spine lining that's already coming off. So she's gonna also glue up the spine to reattach the spine lining at the same time that she's doing the hinge. Because otherwise the spine, the binder's tape is already not attached to the text block because the spine lining is coming off.
So like in a perfect world where there's no time, like, so would you let that first round of glue just with the paper and
The spine lining is
spine
the
line, yes, would you let that like set before you do the binding?
I probably wouldn't for
Okay,
this one, especially because it still is attached on the bottom, so I'm not worried about it shifting
Okay.
around. If it was a totally separate piece, then yeah.
Okay.
Okay, remind me, I need to put it again. Yep. So I glued and I'm like, I feel like I just pulled something up, right, but I don't.
Yep. So you were gonna check that?
This is the.
Yes, so
Okay.
this is going to attach to the spine lining.
Okay.
Which is okay because it has that.
Okay, and then I'm gonna bring this up.
Yep. And you'll just, yeah, you know, use your bone folder, use whatever you need to make sure that.
Let's go to the down.
And then I did the same
Yeah,
thing.
this is like right on.
I lifted it up and
the
then
edge.
inside like this.
But. In small.
So that I can make sure that's nice and tight against that.
That's the.
I'm figuring out the mechanics.
Yeah.
Or I'm doing things that go like that.
Yep. In your little workbooks too, in the back, I listed resources again. So this second bullet point, how to repair broken hinges. This is the video that I looked at from Brodart that taught me how to do this. So this should be very helpful for you. It uses this exact spine tape. Or binder's tape. Maybe.
Oh, okay.
So it's gonna be.
And then you can see the pillows have a little wonky, so it's just kind of stir it up as best you can. I have some rubber bands. I don't know what they're called, they're in there, I'll double say, that I'll sometimes put on looks like this that are kind of short. To sort of hold them in place a little bit better. Ideally, in a perfect world, you would have a book press, but then you would put this in and you get it all squared up. But you know, we're not doing anything too messy here, so.
We have a couple bricks that we use.
Oh, there you go, perfect, that's perfect. I often just stack all of the books that I'm mending on top of each other and just use their own weight
Yeah.
to hold them. Yeah, so this is I think called an H band, and technically it's supposed to have one of these on each side. But most of the books that we mend are not quite big enough for that, so I just kind of like jumping jacket. a little bit. And I'll try and get it. And then again, like that. Yeah, absolutely. Except I set it down somewhere.
Whatever use there is on these,
With that?
I think whatever the reason is all on here is being activated as we would. It sure seems sticky. to them.
I think you're right. Yeah, and I'm not sure, like I said, there were no instructions in the box where I found this, so I don't know how it was originally intended to be activated. But more glue definitely doesn't hurt it. Yeah, and so these are some rubber bands that I use sometimes with these type of mends. I think they're called H bands because they look like the letter H. But if you have a book that, you know how when books get old or they've been sitting weird on the shelf, they are no longer square on the spine. So if I'm doing a repair like this, I'll do everything I can to kind of square it up. And then I will use these H bands to kind of hold it in place a little bit tighter than just sitting in a pile. They're supposed to be used sort of like this so that each side has a rubber band on it, but usually the books are not big enough for that to actually be helpful. So I just do kind of like a little star shape. And that seems to work well. And then again, and then I might like put a book like this at the bottom of the stack so that the weight of all the books is holding it in place. If it has been living at a weird angle for many years, chances are this isn't gonna really fix it. But it definitely won't hurt it to try to square it up. And again, if you're doing these kinds of repairs on your books frequently, then the books are less likely to have that kind of long-term damage. Because as soon as you notice it, you're fixing the smaller things, and then it doesn't get to the bigger things as much. How's it going?
It's getting the other piece of this. Again, that's
Yep, and that's okay. That's what we want.
right. Okay,
Yep.
so I want to push it in
Mhm.
from the
Yes.
spine side. Okay.
Because it's that butterfly. Because
Yeah.
it's that butterfly shape, it preserves the hollow.
Right.
And so, yeah, so you definitely
But
want.
getting it attached to the
Oh, sure.
spine cover, yeah.
Yeah, so if you close it up,
Those stuff.
you can also kind of like.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you feel like you're having trouble getting that inside flap attached to the spine, once you have everything all lined up how you want it, you can put the spine flat on the table and kind of rub it down and use the pressure of your hands to help push it together. You can also use your hand just on the side or a bone folder on the side to help that adhesion.
I'm gonna do this and then I'm gonna ask, unless you guys other things, you do other things.
Nope.
Okay, so this is it. Okay, then I wanna ask about these, they're skinny.
Okay.
So.
you missed.
No,
those,
I
the
have
flip
books
book.
come back, bites taken out of them,
Oh, yep.
but not with just bite marks.
We get both. I don't know what it is that kids are just so excited about, about the book.
They're just so excited they have to take a bite out of
Munch
it.
on it, yeah.
They chew on the pages all
Yeah, I know. And that's elementary school kids that you're seeing that on. Yeah, usually the bites taken out of them are like pets. My favorite is when the like How to Train Your Dog books come back and they're like all
That's
chewed up. Yeah,
Didn't do very well, did you?
yeah, it's like, I see why you needed this book. All right. So like I said, the books, other than the library ones that I had you help with the hinge tightening, the other books are donations, so you get to take them with you, so you can check on them tomorrow and see how everything looks. There's also a second thicker book if you want to try another hinge repair. I'm more than happy to hang out and help you with that. In the booklet, like I mentioned at the end here, we have some resources. So Demco does sell the double stitch binders tape like what we have here, but they also sell single stitch binders tape, which I think just makes a lot more sense and is more versatile. So that's what I would recommend. The video How to Repair Broken Hinges, this is by Brodart, and this is the exact video that I watched to learn how to do that hinge replacement that we just learned. And then I also found this Repairing Loose Book Hinges video that talks about 3 different methods that you can use to repair loose book hinges. This is a video where I saw that she just used the glue brush to brush the glue on the knitting needle before putting it in. She also will use just a skinny glue brush and stick it in. And I can't remember what the third way was. The last one though was the variation on the knitting needle method that we used. Like I said, I think that one is the easiest. I think it makes the most sense for libraries where this is a common repair that we're doing all the time. Yeah. Any final questions? Oh, before we go, I did also want to show you. So this magical Pokemon book. When I came to repair it, you can't really see it here in the video, but it has, it already has some book tape or packing tape that was used to try to fix it. And I learned that you can't just glue the binder's tape directly onto a previous mend like that, because the book tape or the packing tape doesn't absorb the glue. And so wherever there wasn't tape, it stuck, but where there was tape, then it didn't adhere, and that didn't work. So what I figured out does work is our handy Filmoplast paper tape. So if you use this, and before you attach the hinge, or after you've attached it and it hasn't stuck, you can use the paper tape and just put it down underneath where the hinge is going to go. And because it's paper tape, then it does absorb the glue, and then everything holds together. So that's a fun little tidbit that I learned working on this book, because it had a lot going on with it. And once I did that with the paper tape, then it stuck perfectly. And you can see it's super sturdy now, which is really nice. So wanted to share that little piece of knowledge because it was a surprise to me as I opened it and I was like, why isn't it sticking? But then once I looked at it, of course it made sense. So I'll pass this around too if anyone wants to look at it and kind of see it up close, because it's hard on the video since it is all transparent tape. So I didn't take the width of the cover because the cover is going to be bigger. I did the width of the text block spine. And so because it was totally detached, that was easy to do. I just took the book and I lined it up with the stitching. And then I used a pencil to just mark how wide it was. And then I cut it and I put it up against the book and then trimmed it a little bit more because I didn't want it to be too big.
Do you ever intentionally detach the whole text block if it was damaged enough?
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, not how we did today where they were pretty, pretty well stuck on. But yeah, if it is mostly detached, or the part that is detached is completely separated and it's just hanging on like a little bit at the bottom, it definitely makes sense to detach it completely so that you can do a full repair on the whole thing. Good question.
Can I ask you about this special case?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Oh yeah, this was the one you brought last time and I said, hang on to it.
Yeah. So this one I could just use the hinge tape on, right?
Yep.
Just do what we just did.
Mhm.
And at the beginning here, I would just glue that.
Yep.
I would-
Yep, and then I would reinforce it probably with that electric tape.
Okay.
So definitely glue it first, because if you do the tape first, then there's still that gap in there.
Okay. And then this one, would I just want to cut that and put the hinge tape in? Yeah. I just want to detach that, okay. And then.
Yeah.
Over here.
Yeah, so this can I put it on?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So this is a great example of well, it's only partially detached. What do I do? So you can see it's detached here. The netting on the spine is detached, but only up at the top. At the bottom, it's just separated, but it's still glued. Especially because of the size of this book and the fact that the other side is also very much detached, but still connected a little bit. I would completely detach the text block from the cover so that you can do the hinge repair that we just talked about today. Otherwise, you're just going to be doing kind of tiny Band-Aid repairs and it's just going to keep coming apart. Really big, oversized books tend to need a lot of help with the hinges because they just aren't bound well enough for the weight that they carry. Anybody else have any books that they brought or questions?
I brought another one.
Great. Let's all
This
learn.
one has got pages coming out. And it's. And then, it's got the knitting there.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure where to start with this.
Yeah, so because this
Yeah.
So this one is a glued binding. So we can see up at the top, there aren't any signatures, right? Like those little folds of paper that you would see with a sewn book. And so for this one, because this is your book that you love and want to preserve, what I would recommend is going through and tipping on each page until you've gotten through the whole stack. And then once all of them are tipped on, including, and then, glue up this last one to tip it on, I would also put glue on the spine to reattach it. And it looks like in the back, you could also do a hinge replacement on the back if you wanted, or since this is a personal book that isn't being circulated a bunch, you could also just do the tip in mend here too, if you didn't want to add that binder's tape to it. But yeah, it's tricky with the glued bindings because you can see eventually the glue just dries out, and that's what happens here. So, does that help?
Yes, it does.
Okay. If it was a library book, I would say it's not worth your time to glue up each one, and recommend either replacing it or discarding it, depending on how well it's circulating. But the nice thing about your personal books is that you can spend as much time as you want fixing things and tweaking things, and you also know to be careful with it. Those types of things that patrons, of course, don't know that you did all of this delicate repair work and that they can't just throw it in their backpack or whatever. So that's why I really love this binder's tape, because it just is so sturdy. And especially with oversized books or books that are really thick, It's a repair that I know is gonna hold on and last. Good questions. Any other questions or thoughts or people thinking of books that are on the mending shelves of, oh, I could do that? Yeah.
And
Laura.
something, for those of you who need CE credit for your state accreditations, you can fill out the form online and you'll get credit. I already got credit for the first class and it was just a quick pop.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Did you send that, the link to Alexis and then she can send
It's
it
just
out to
on the
everybody?
state library on the CE, yeah, the very first page. Yeah,
Oh, okay, perfect. I've only ever done the CE credits like through the stuff they provide, so I've never
right there,
looked
there's
at
a form you fill out.
Awesome. And I did apply to do a workshop at the, oh my gosh, the ILA, thank you. So, but I haven't heard back, so I don't know if it's gonna happen.
Well, and the workshop was discussed at the Johnson County Librarians Directors Meeting,
Oh, great.
so don't be surprised.
Excellent. Well, I would be happy to do it. It's very satisfying work. All right, everyone that still has their glue brushes filled with glue, do you remember how to clean them out?
Yep. Your soap in your palm, rub it around.